Hey there, entrepreneurs. My name is Sushant, and welcome to TrepTalks. This is a show where I interview successful e-commerce entrepreneurs, business executives, and thought leaders, and ask them questions about their business stories, and also dive deep into some of the strategies and tactics that they have used to start and grow their businesses. And today, I'm really excited to welcome Andy Sartori to the show. Andy is the founder of MealPro. Andy started MealPro to make it easy for people with demanding schedules to get great nutrition with convenience at an affordable price. And today I'm going to ask Andy a few questions about his entrepreneurial journey and some of the strategies and tactics that he has used to start and grow his business. Now, before we dive into this interview, if you enjoy this content, please make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. And for more interviews like this, please visit treptalks.com. And with that, Andy, welcome again. And thank you so much for joining me today at Trep Talks. Really, really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be with you.
So, you definitely have a very interesting business. You have combined kind of the food prep, food delivery business with e-commerce. Um, how did you get the idea? When did you start? And what kind of motivated you to start this business?
Well, I wanted to help people and hopefully in a business that plays to my characteristics and my strengths. So when I started, I just made a list of all my characteristics, be they good qualities, bad qualities, just everything that kind of my DNA, my genetic makeup at the time. And it turns out that I was passionate about food and I was also very interested in being healthy. And I had a plethora of other things that made up my characteristics. Like at the time, I was just out of college and I was young, and I had a lot of time on my hands. I had a lot of constraints financially, but so I just made a list of what made up my characteristics and what my passions were, and then I reverse engineered it. And how can I apply the skills that make up who I am into a business? Because ultimately, I want to do something that I can sustain for a long period of time, something that I have a lot of continuity with over a span of decades, not just a 5 or a 10 year stint. So I found out that really where everything married together was kind of in like a healthy food
Hmm.
and being healthy through what we're eating. So that's really what started everything on a piece of paper. It was just, and that's all it was at the beginning. It was just an idea on a piece of paper.
No, that's you bring a very interesting point where, when people are trying to or thinking about starting a business, I mean, it's difficult to come up with an idea. And I think I mean, the criteria that you used, it's like it's a perfect way to figure out what would be someone should get into a business with, um, especially if they're doing business for the first time, right? Because if they don't know about something or they are not interested in, I think to because business is challenging, it's very difficult to continue if you're not motivated to do that. Um,
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Going off of what you said, it's certainly a tremendous sacrifice. And every single day I feel the entry barrier. I moved because of my business. I changed geographic location. This is what I do on the weekends. This is what I do during the week. It's really 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And so just being passionate really makes it so it's easier to sacrifice. If you want to be a great parent, you might have to sacrifice for your children. If you want to be a great soldier, you might have to sacrifice for the cause. If you want to be a great clergy, you have to sacrifice for the religion. If you want to be a great athlete, you might have to sacrifice, to traveling teams. Growing up, you might not go to birthday parties because you have to practice your sport and hone your skill. And so in the same way, being in the business requires a lot of sacrifice. So that's where the foundation of passion makes it so that I could always do it with a smile. And I was always very fulfilled. And that's really why I've sustained it for close to a decade now, and hopefully many more decades to come.
So when you were starting out, did you not ever think that you wanted to go like in a traditional corporate job or any sort of a job kind of a situation? What was it about business that was interesting?
Well, so I actually had a job. So I was a part-time entrepreneur at first.
Okay.
I was a part-time business owner. My back was not against the wall because I had a day job. Um, and what I very quickly realized is that, my day job was a very normal job, a job that many people have. And so, but the main differentiator between me and everybody else was really how much time I had on my hands because other than the job, I didn't have much else going on in life, right?
Hmm.
I mean, I'm not married. I was just out of college. I had some social activities going on, but really you know, the quality that I had most was time, and the quality that I had the least was financial capital,
Hmm.
right? So I figured out, well, okay, I have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of money. Then how do I make time my leg up in business? How do I use that resource that I have in abundance to get myself an advantage? And so while I was working, I was also doing MealPro at the same time.
Hmm.
Uh, and I couldn't hire people to do MealPro for me, right?
Hmm.
So I would always do it after work between hours. And when I would get stuck on a problem, rather than throwing money at it to solve my problem because I didn't have financial resources, I would have to invest time in solving the problem. So eventually, as I transitioned from, having a job to being a full-time entrepreneur, my solution to any problem that I had was always, I'm going to throw more time at it.
Hmm.
I will invest more time into it, um, because I didn't have the financial resources to invest, right? So it ended up really taking over my life, and it gradually sucked me in more and more. And then eventually things began to change, and I was started making a little bit of revenue, and then eventually I became a full-time entrepreneur, and then a very good one a little bit later.
And you brought like a few very good points again. I mean, I think in entrepreneurship, many times throwing money at a problem is usually the wrong approach. I think when you're and that happens a lot of the times, when companies become big, they run into problems and they start throwing money at it, and they're not able to solve it properly. And some, small company comes and they're, all in, they're trying to problem solve the right way, and they're able to outpace them. So I think that's a really good lesson for anybody who's, yeah, starting out.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you there. And something that I've learned is that, I've done north of $10 million in sales, right? So, I mean, something that I've learned is anytime you throw money at a problem, it's actually a symptom of incompetence. There's a lack of ability, and then you try to make up for it with the US dollar. And it ends up being very expensive and not very effective way to solve problems. I mean, knowledge and wisdom is what solves problems for the most part. And sometimes it's an excuse. It's like, oh, if I can just throw money at a problem, and it's just this alibi, um, right?
Yeah.
And even when I hire people, when I hear that, sometimes I hear that rhetoric, be like, oh, you know what, boss? If I had more resources, if I had a bigger P&L, if you could increase my budget, if we could just spend more money, I could solve this problem. And to me, that's always, my BS detector is always going off when I hear that, as in, that's a red flag to me because I know from experience, starting with a food truck, that it's constraints make companies better, and then a lot of time just investing um, time and gaining that knowledge can very frequently it has made me overcome these obstacles.
Yeah. Yeah, constraints is a very good word. That always helps you. I think constraints help people quite a bit. I'm very curious. So when you started, to me it seems like, I mean, did you start selling these meals to your own community? I mean, to me it seems like maybe you were involved in bodybuilding community or something, and you were solving. No?
No,
Can you share like how
no,
did you get started?
I never sold them to my own community. No,
Okay.
it was actually most of my sales were to complete strangers that I had never even met or never even spoken with. And that's the e-commerce business model, right? So the e-commerce business model is you're selling to people whom you've never met. There's very few touch points between me and the person that's buying it. Everything is done through like a website or like a portal. So there's very frequently between me and the first customers, there was actually very few interactions, if any.
So did you first start a website before? So you had an idea, you started a website, you got it online, and you basically shared a value proposition that I'm creating this meal, healthy, nutritious meal for busy professionals. And is that how you got started? Or so you created the business first before the product?
So when I started, I actually the very beginning of the modern version of MealPro was with a co-packer. So a co-packer was making the meals, and I was selling them on the website.
Okay.
So there was somebody else involved, like a third party making the food, and then I would sell it. So that's the modern version of MealPro came about. Before that, I had a food truck. That was a different concept that kind of morphed into more of this e-commerce model. But yeah, so to answer your question, I was doing the website. It was another party that was worried about the operations, and eventually I married the two into one.
Okay. So you did not start with the food aspect of it. You were more of the marketing person, and then you brought the two ideas together.
Well, so the the very beginning, I was the food person at the very beginning.
Okay.
That's how it started. I very quickly realized I didn't have the skills to sell. So yeah, I can make the food. I got that part down, and I was lacking that step between I have the food, how do I sell the food?
Hmm.
And then I threw time at my problem, right? Because I didn't have the financial resources.
Hmm.
So I think all of us know how to make food. I mean, making food is, you make food at home. All of us have a concept of how to make food. I worked in the restaurant industry, so I knew about food. I was passionate about it. That wasn't the most difficult part for me. The hardest part was learning how to find customers, how to distribute the product, and not having the financial resources. I had to throw myself and my time at the problem, right? So I handed off the food to a co-packer, and I just started learning about um, how to build a website, how to Photoshop, how do I use this? I was on Skype with freelancers across the world because it only cost me $1 or $2 an hour to be with a freelancer across the world. And
Hmm.
I'd be doing it over like a broken Skype connection, right? I
Hmm.
was paying freelancers via Western Union. So that's how I started. Very few dollars. I mean, a freelancer across the world, I have to be awake at 3 in the morning US time.
Hmm.
But the benefit to that is if I have the willingness to sacrifice and be awake at 3 a.m. US time, then I can find a freelancer across the world that's awake in his local time for just a couple dollars, right? And then Skype is a free tool, and I have a free connection, so that's free. So a lot of the times I can get my problem solved for just a couple dollars. But then I have to have the willingness to be awake at that time to find somebody across the world, right?
Hmm.
So when the money is not there, the sacrifice has to be there. That's very important. The sacrifice has to be there because if you don't want to sacrifice, you don't want to be up at 3 in the morning, and I want to find a local guy that's going to talk to me at 10 a.m. U.S. time, then it's going to cost me more, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where the sacrifice comes in, right? That we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Can you
Uh,
talk a little bit about how you found the co-packer? Like, was there any financial commitment there, or did you have connections? Because I would assume like, if somebody is going to a co-packer, there would be some sort of a commitment. Like, they would say, bring me this much volume before I will work with you, or something like that. Was there some commitment there?
yeah, it was a very big problem for me. Yeah, it was a very big problem. Um, yeah, so huge. So what I ended up doing is I had a co-packer that made the food, and I found some modest volume commitments. So I bought, it was like 3 grand worth of food, $3,000 worth of food. And then the packaging was another big problem because there's a big volume commitment on packaging.
Hmm.
But there was a Smart and Final like down the street from my parents' house that carried tailgate coolers,
Hmm.
and then next to the Smart and Final was a U.S. Post Office that carried boxes.
Hmm.
So I bought the tailgate cooler from Smart and Final. I bought the dry ice from Smart and Final, and then I would buy a corrugated box from like the U.S. Post Office that was in the same shopping center.
Hmm.
So I had the volume requirement on the food from my co-packer, but then at least on the packaging requirement, I was able to get just a volume of one, right? When I
Hmm.
would go to Smart Final, I'd just pick up like one one unit of dry ice, one tailgate cooler, and then one box at the post office. So at least on the packaging, I didn't have these. I had high prices, but I didn't have these massive volume requirements.
Hmm.
Um, so that's how I got around the volume requirements with the packaging, and I made it work. Right, it wasn't perfect. The tailgate cooler did not fit in the box just right,
Hmm.
but I was able to put some spacers in there to make it fit. I added condiment packs to the top of the cooler
Hmm.
so I could fill the space so that way, if I put some condiment packs on top of the tailgate cooler, the lid won't open when it's in transit, right? Because I'm adding that little bit of thickness to keep it shut.
Hmm.
So I
But
got creative, and I was able to find a way to package the meals and send them with just materials that I had available.
but what about with the co-packer? Like, did you commit to a certain volume? Like, I mean, with food, of course, you can't store it for a long period of time, right?
It was frozen food.
Oh, frozen
Yeah.
food. Okay. So, but now I see on your website the food looks quite fresh. Can you talk a little bit about the food that you're selling? Because the impression that I got was it's more targeted towards healthy lifestyle and or busy professionals who are trying to live healthy. How do you describe your food selection?
Well, we have different silos. I mean, we have different themes and different groups. So we'll have the weight loss. We'll have, people with allergies. We'll have people with different health needs. Like diabetes. We have low sodium. We have heart healthy. We have renal failure meals. We have exclusion diets like a paleo. We have, keto diets, bodybuilding diets, like high calorie diets. So it's very different based on the um, I guess we have a very broad selection, you could say.
Okay. I mean, the reason I'm asking is because I think food delivery and food service, it's a very competitive market now, right? I mean, there's some big companies that are doing it at a much larger scale, I guess a national scale. Um, do
I
you
mean,
consider,
we're doing it on a national scale also.
oh, you are, okay. Do you consider them as your competitor, or are you carving your own niche with more targeting your food to specific niche of um, personas?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I mean, I think the textbook, like an academic definition, would be that they are competitors.
Okay.
But that's a very academic definition because in reality, we're also competing with the alternative. And when you look at alternatives, there's a lot more than just competitors. You can make your own food. That's an alternative. You can have a caretaker make your food. You can
Hmm.
have you can go to a restaurant. That's an alternative.
Hmm.
So really, we're competing against a lot more than just the people that are in our lane.
Hmm.
Um, and I think we have to keep our sights on that. A common example that I think of is a photographer. They might identify as competing against other photographers, but they're also competing against my iPhone,
Hmm.
right? Because my iPhone can take pictures.
Hmm.
They're also competing against me and my DSLR because I can take pictures with my DSLR camera, right?
Hmm.
So, in terms of selling food, yeah, we're competing against other people that sell the same food as us, but we're also looking at how can we be the best alternative, like full stop.
Hmm.
And your alternative might be you make food yourself, right?
Hmm.
So I think we have a much more comprehensive and holistic view of what we need to watch out for, and we're a lot more like encompassing than just strictly the people that compete against us.
So what do you consider your value proposition versus the competitor? Like what is when a person is looking for a food service or a food delivery, healthy food, um, what makes them select your service versus an alternative, competitor?
Well, usually they like the food and they come back. They
Okay.
like the taste. I mean, really, it's I mean, if you're looking at it from behind a computer, if you're looking at it on a piece of paper, you might get tricked, right? There's a lot of tricks that you see because one person has a bigger discount and one person has, maybe more rhetoric. But what we do is we just give more like bigger portions,
Okay.
and then we give better ingredients. And we're very specific about the ingredients that we use, going down to the farm that they come from. And it's not easy to pick up on these things if you're just assessing the company from behind the computer.
Hmm.
Um, because there's so much misinformation out there that it can be very difficult to parse through all the misinformation.
Hmm.
But when we boil it down, ultimately we have more options, larger portion sizes, and better ingredients and better prices on a per ounce basis. And then ultimately, what keeps people coming back is just the fact that they like the food. There's not much marketing, not many big discounts, 50% off. We don't do too much. We don't do any of that, frankly.
Hmm. Hmm.
It doesn't make sense to me. It's we just focus on just good food.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the most important thing. Like when it comes to food, people want uh good tasting and good quality ingredients, right? Like that's the bottom line, I guess, there. Um, so I was on your website and I tried, selecting a food package, and I selected, let's say I'm vegetarian, I selected the vegetarian, and it gave me the option to have, I believe it's 22 meals in one selection. So how does it work? So you ship out that meal, and I then I freeze the meals and basically use them over a period of time.
Yeah, you can do that. That's a good way to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. You keep some in your refrigerator, you keep some in your freezer, and that tends to work.
Okay. Do you offer, I didn't see on your website, do you offer a subscription service? Do you offer, like, if I have placed an order once, is there an option for me where I can basically turn on a subscription so I don't have to order the food again and again, like every month or something?
Yes, we do have that.
I'm very curious about because a big part of your business, so, your business has different parts. One is the e-commerce purchasing part. Then you have the food preparation part, and then you have, I think a big part of your business is kind of the logistics or the delivery part of the business, right? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think with food, there's the consideration of keeping it fresh. Um, there's the consideration you said that you have national distribution. So how do you distribute food nationally? And are there any challenges in the logistics of this business?
Well, so and most of the time I have to disclose when a company is advertising their food as fresh, they mean it's defrosted. That's
Okay.
really what it means because food supply chain is frozen for obvious reasons of shelf life. So when you're buying a meal kit and they say it's delivered to you fresh, really what they mean is we can't get it to you frozen, so it's actually going to be defrosted by the time you receive it. So we're advertising it as fresh.
Okay.
That's how our competitors operate. We have a different model. We just kind of embrace the fact that the food supply chain is frozen, and if we send it to you, it's going to be frozen. So, um, and that's all food is going to be frozen at some point. So if you receive it fresh, it's probably just thawed.
Hmm.
And yeah, so what we do is we have better nutrient retention when it's frozen. We actually blast freeze the food, and what that means is there's moisture in like a protein. If you're freezing a piece of meat, and actually as the water inside the meat freezes, it also expands, right? Like
Hmm.
when you freeze a water bottle, it actually expands.
Yeah.
So what happens when you freeze a piece of meat is it expands and it breaks the fibers of the meat. So
Okay.
when it defrosts, it becomes mushy. You lose a little bit of that texture. What we do is we blast chill all our food. So we take it down in temperature very fast. And there's actually not enough time for there to be moisture inside the actual item. So it prevents the structure from breaking if we freeze it fast enough, right? So then when you go to reheat it, it's going to have the same texture. You almost won't even be able to tell that it was a frozen product just because of the speed that we take it down in temperature with. Um, you might hear that a lot. Blast chilling is good for food,
Hmm.
but then people don't tell you why it's good, or people may not understand why it's better to freeze things quickly.
Hmm.
And it's that way the moisture inside the product doesn't actually break the fibers and break the structure of the product, right? So you're freezing it faster than that. And that's what we do. And then we keep it frozen. So by the time it reaches your door and you're reheating it, you won't even be able to tell. I mean, it keeps the texture the same, right? And then we invest more in our packaging. I mean, we have like thicker insulation on our packaging. We have 1.5 inch thick packaging, higher density packaging. So it weighs more, it's heavier. And then we use an aircraft service when we go across the nation to deliver it. Um, we have a combination of gel packs as well. So the combination of like gel packs, dry ice sometimes can extend the just the thermal aspects inside the box. So we've kind of reverse engineered it, and we got it to where we know what packaging goes with what time zone, and we have a weather watch, so we can better respond to storms that are happening in the Midwest or wherever. So we don't just send boxes out every single week. We kind of change the days depending on the weather patterns. Sometimes we have to skip weeks, like we won't be able to send it out for 1 week if we have a snowstorm in the winter, or if we have a hurricane in the summer, or if there's fires in Southern California, we
Hmm.
might just not deliver to that area. So unfortunately, there can be disruptions to the service because of weather, and we're very much impacted by it.
I mean, that sounds like complicated. I mean, you need someone coordinating the whole logistics part of it. Like, do you own a certain portion of it, like local delivery or regional delivery, and then you work with other shipping partners, or
Yeah,
is it
we do a little bit
completely?
of very minimal. We do very a little bit of that ourselves, but we rely on a lot on partners. We do.
And that brings me to my next question is around the cost of this and the pricing strategy. I mean, it seems like um, your cost is around the product itself, like preparation of the product, and then to me it seems like there's a big cost associated with the fulfillment. Can you talk a little bit about it and in your pricing strategy? Like, does this business have a good profit margin?
Yeah, so it's a very big cost. There's a very big packaging cost, a very big fulfillment cost, and we have a vertical integration strategy at MealPro. Like, we own our food facility. We make everything in house. So yeah, we have a lot of expenses on the fulfillment, but then we kind of vertically integrate.
Hmm.
Um, so we try to make up for the big expenses on one side of our operations, and we keep expenses very reasonable on the other side of our operation. So we have a balance.
And your customers, you're selling mostly to individuals. You're not, do you also do like corporate or are you also into like retail stores and other businesses?
No, we're just we strictly do individuals.
Okay.
We do some B2B, but it's minimal. It's mostly to individuals. That's really what our business is geared towards, and our distribution and our marketing and our, the way we package the food. We have individual serving sizes. It's very easy for one person to order and for one person to update their preferences. We really do well with individuals.
Okay, that makes sense. You did mention before that you have minimal marketing, like most of your business is repeat purchases, which makes sense. Can you talk a little bit about your market? Like, what is your customer acquisition strategy? How do you get new customers? Is it mostly word of mouth, or do you do local advertising? Can you talk a little bit about your marketing?
Minimal. It's really very minimal.
So people search on website and they find your website, or?
Yeah, that's one of the ways.
Okay.
And if you've ever seen the hockey stick graph of how a company grows,
Yeah.
I was very gradual at first, and then it becomes exponential. Yeah, I can relate to that. We're not trying to force the hockey stick curve prematurely by pumping a bunch of ads in the business. I want to make sure that we have like very good customer retention, and we're always working on retention. So then, even if our customer acquisition isn't very aggressive, it's really customer retention that keeps kind of the inertia going, right? And so, if we just focus everything we have on customer retention, so having more variety, having just very, very high quality, having accommodating different needs so people can customize their meals. All of that contributes to our having the good packaging, getting the box to their door on time, communicating. We do a lot of this just to retain the customers that we have. And with retention, it's been effective. So we don't have to have a high customer acquisition because we don't have a high churn, right? If we had a high churn, then we would need to replenish them more. But thankfully, because we have a very low churn, then our customer acquisition, it's okay if it's low, right? Because our ovens can only produce so much, and it keeps us in the range where we like to be.
Okay. I mean, that says a lot of good things about your business. I mean, if your customers or the lifetime value of your customer, or if they're staying with your product for a long time, I mean, basically says a lot about customer satisfaction. They're satisfied. They like what they're getting.
Yeah, I mean, we have great reviews on Google. And I think that people that work with us just know the value that we provide, and we're very. I think we're very transparent with what the meal is, and people are happy, and it keeps them coming back, and we don't have to spend too much on just acquiring new customers because we can keep the ones that we have. So that's been our strategy.
What have you learned about your customers? Like, do you see different personas? Do you see certain age groups? Do you see more fitness enthusiasts? I mean, you did mention, there's like different meal types. It seems like some of them also cater to like maybe people who are dealing with diabetes or blood pressure or those kind of things. But have you learned anything interesting about your customers?
Well, just customizations. Customizations seem to be just a common denominator across everybody. I mean, it's just I think it's something that really differentiates us, and it's something that they all appreciate.
Okay. Interesting. And right now you're totally in the US. Do you have any plans of growing? I know you mentioned that you like to be in a certain range. Do you have plans of like growing? Is there a bigger market out there that you want to go after, or you're kind of satisfied in the range that you are in, and you kind of keep your business to that level?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely been growing a lot. If you look at just the square footage that we have, the number of customers we have, the variety that we have. So the first part about growing is defining growth. Like, how do you define growth? It can be a dollar value. It can be how much square feet do you have?
Hmm.
How many ovens do you have? How much electricity do you consume? How many people do you employ, right? Because those are all they those can all be used to define and track growth. So, when I say growth, I usually define it with some metrics.
Hmm.
So,
I mean,
how big is
usually
the
it will
building?
be like, it could be like 10% revenue growth year over year. Like, do you have those kind of goals every year, or?
Yeah, we have targets, and overall, it's there's the quantifiable targets and the qualifiable targets, right? So the quantifiable targets would be things like 10% year over year revenue growth. That's a quantity. It's very nice on paper to have that KPI.
Hmm.
And I find that that's a trailing indicator. Usually a leading indicator would be the qualitative metrics, like, how are we doing in terms of presentation? Does it look nice? Is the texture good on the food? So then there's all these qualitative metrics that are actually the leading indicators. And then if we nail those, then all of a sudden the quantitative metrics follow, right? Because then we see the customers stay with us longer, right? So I would say we have those revenue targets and everything else, but what I push more is the qualitative metrics, because I know that those are the leading indicators. And then if we hit those, eventually then everything else kind of trails and follows.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, if I think if your product is good, and which is what I believe you're saying, then revenues are going to follow, right? Um, can you talk a little bit about your team? I see on your website, you have I see a few faces of your team members. How big is your team now? Are there any special roles? I mean, is there a marketing department? How many people are in the prep area and so forth?
Yeah, well, so right now we have, I mean, this year alone, we started the year January and February. We've hired 5 people. So we have 5 new people that have been added to the team in these last 2 months. That brings our number to about 20. So that tells you something, right? That tells you that the last 2 months make up a quarter of our people in 2 months, and the company's been around since. And I've been a full-time entrepreneur since November 2017, right? So,
Well,
25% person growth in 2 months, and that's just because it's an area that we focus on this year. This is the year of human capital.
hmm.
Some years we have years of footprint. We have years where we want to expand the square footage, the size of our building, and that becomes our focus. And then we're very aggressive about growing.
Hmm.
Sometimes we have the year of like infrastructure
Hmm.
where we invest buying trucks, buying equipment, buying ovens, just getting that infrastructure set up.
Hmm.
We go all in on that, and we take that metric, and that becomes kind of our North Star.
Hmm.
And this year, the metric has been people, human capital. So we started off the year and we say this is the year we're going to grow the team. Other
Hmm.
years we used to really grow the size of the building, the square footage, the presence, and this has been the year of human capital, and we're going to continue that.
I mean, that's a unique. I mean, that's a unique strategy that I've heard. I
That's because of
usually
our constraints. That's because we have
Okay.
constraints. We
Okay.
can't do everything at the same time. So given our constraints, rather than trying to do everything,
Hmm.
say, let's just pick one thing that we're going to do really, really well right now. And we're going to focus all our attention on just the food facility, Let's go find the very best equipment, the very best water filtration system. Let's go find the very best ingredients, and let's just focus all our energy and channel all our resources on that, and just be the best in our industry at doing that one thing. And it's been a successful approach. I think as we grow, and we get more into that hockey stick like curve, then we can start doing maybe two things at the same time. We'll chase two rabbits. We're gonna double the square footage and double the people. But so far, with our constraints, it's been just one at a time type mentality.
That makes sense. Do you see specific markets in the US where most of your demand come from? I'm assuming it's the bigger states like New York, California, Texas. And does that impact at all on how you think about your business and where you're located and so forth?
Yeah, so it just ends up being geography for us. So the people that are closest are the most accessible. Logically, you would think, oh, maybe the big population centers have the most demand, and they do, just because of numbers. But because of our distribution and our accessibility, it ends up being actually based on geography.
Okay. This is a unique kind of a business. What have been some of the biggest challenges in this business to crack?
Well, I just think it's doing too much at the same time. Because our journey is doing, and this goes maybe on something we discussed earlier, where I said we focus on just, hiring 1 year. And then we go through a phase where we're only focusing on square footage and finding the right facility. And then we go through a phase where we only focus on equipment, refrigerated trucks, supply chain. So I think the most challenging thing is doing many easy things at the same time. And that's what I've learned not to do, is don't chase two rabbits. So I try to just keep it focused on the marketing. You can say the same. If you do, or if I did social media marketing, influencer marketing, email marketing, paid advertisement, billboard advertisement, radio advertisement, PR. If I did conversion rate optimization, if I did those 8 things all at the same time, it would be very, very challenging for a company with our resources to do, right? Because we would be so diluted on so many different fronts. So there's a lot that we currently don't do because of our scarcity of resources, right? And, not that we're a very small company, but I think big companies can benefit from doing fewer things better, maybe as well, right? But especially in scaling, I think just being as focused as possible. And in the beginning, I just completely gave up on paid advertisement, for example, right? I just said we simply are going to do 0 of it. So I started to do just a step at a time, right? The old adage of you have to crawl before you can run.
For sure.
Right. So I think just knowing the edge of kind of my own competence, knowing my own limits, and being content with that actually made it possible to grow versus being too distracted that you end up kind of building a house of cards that falls in on itself, right?
No, those are great fundamentals for sure. Yeah. I'm very curious. These days I think robotics is kind of coming up as a technology. Is there an opportunity in this kind of a business of utilizing robotics to kind of automate some of the processes? Maybe you already are, in one way or another. Is there an opportunity for robotics in your kind of a business?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think as technology advances, it's going to disrupt every industry, including ours. I am not an early adopter. Okay, I'll disclose that. I'm not somebody who's on the cutting edge of adopting new technologies. I'm more cautious. So we have a lot of machines here, but we know they work because they've been around for a long time, right?
Hmm.
So I think when they cross the chasm, then we're like the late adopters. We don't want robotics that keeps breaking down, and we're the guinea pigs that they use to improve their technology, right? That's really not what we want to do. So yes, absolutely, I think it's going to have a very big role, a very important role. We're going to be happy to adopt, and please try it on somebody else first. Let them be your guinea pig. Let them have the failures. Let them have the disasters. And then once it's all hashed out, then we can adopt it too. I once was on this, on the forefront of technology, and I've learned the hard way that it's better to buy kind of the tested and proven products.
Okay. So tell me about that in a second when I ask you for your mistakes. But I'm curious, what is your future vision for your business? Where do you see your business, let's say 5, 10 years down the road? Do you want to continue to have that, step-by-step organic growth and just continue building it? Or do you have like a different vision?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think especially in our industry, in a food industry, I think it's not necessarily the sexiest thing out there, and it seems like I mean, so to answer your question is yes, we definitely want to continue growing. We want to become the best at what we do. Organic growth, I've learned has been very good to us. Um, I think that it's healthy to grow gradually and to grow smart. And I've been so blessed to have all the constraints that I've had, because ultimately we're beating all our competitors that are venture backed.
Hmm.
I mean, really, if you look at our venture backed competitors, quite a few have gone out of business
Hmm.
just because during the pandemic, there was this crazy surge of food delivery companies.
Hmm.
And so they built a business model around the black swan event. And that was not very realistic because COVID was going to blow over.
Hmm.
So, so the near term mentality that is so prevalent in investment is not one that we espouse ourselves. We're more of a long term mentality, like a Berkshire Hathaway company.
Hmm.
Intrinsic value, good foundations, strong year over year growth, a grow smart versus growing at all costs. So we really have these values that they should be they should go hand in hand with investing.
Hmm.
But you'll be surprised how many investors actually don't quite embody these same values. They say they do, but
Hmm.
really they want growth at all costs, and that's not something that we espouse necessarily.
Hmm. No, that is a great point and great way to build a business. But given that you are building a great business, do you ever think about an exit strategy? Like, do you want to be acquired by one of these? No. Okay. Okay. Um, every entrepreneur makes mistakes. There's failures, lessons learned. What has been like your one or two top failures or mistakes that you made in the process? What were your lessons, and what can other entrepreneurs learn from your mistakes?
I think a good learning has been just how to build a team. I think that at the beginning, I remember when I started the company, I could never find people that were willing to work here.
Hmm.
And I'd be just looking at the wall thinking, where am I going to find people to staff the company with? And so that's why I've learned to, um, rely on partners. We work with, we work with like an industry that helps people, students find jobs. and there can be, working with them and using them as a resource to kind of funnel talent towards us
Mm.
has been very important. We've developed a lot of these partnerships with different roles within the company. I think that's been a key.
I mean,
That's been staffing.
I'm surprised to hear you can't find people to work in your business
That
in
was at the
USA.
beginning. That was
Oh,
at the
okay.
beginning. Yeah. Nowadays, there's hardly anybody here that filled out an application that actually started working because they all came in because as soon as I can think of an opening, there's
Hmm.
somebody that knows somebody that wants to work here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, people want jobs, good jobs. So yeah, that makes sense. Um, I'm going to move on to our rapid fire segment. In this segment, I'm going to ask you a few quick questions and you have to answer them maybe in a couple of words or a sentence or so. So the first one is one book recommendation for entrepreneurs and why. And I know that you kind of alluded to you mentioned a few books. You didn't mention the books, but I could hear the book names and the things you were talking about.
Right. I mean, I think one that does not come to mind for most when they think of entrepreneurship books is the book Steve Jobs,
Hmm.
because it gets mislabeled as an autobiography.
Hmm.
And people think, oh, it's a book about the life and the legacy of Steve Jobs. But I read the book on a flight from SFO to Frankfurt, and it was a lot about building products, actually.
Hmm.
It was a lot about, how was the iPhone built? How did the Apple store come to be? So that was a book that surprised me, that I did not really realize that it was an entrepreneurship book until I started reading it. And I said, wow, this is really about how these products were kind of conceived and brought to market.
Hmm.
I think there's a great learning in the book. If you read the book Steve Jobs, you know how dogmatic Steve Jobs was about his hardware and his operating system
Hmm.
going together, which is why Apple has its own hardware and its own operating system.
Hmm.
And I can kind of, apply it to my business. I'm also very dogmatic about vertical integration. Now, I'm not doing it on that scale. I'm not working in that order of magnitude. And with me, vertical integration means I cook the food and I sell the food. But Steve Jobs was the same. He said, a MacBook should not be at Fry's. An Apple product should be sold in an Apple store,
Hmm.
right? He did not want it at Fry's next to a Dell. He wanted to kind of manage that experience himself, right?
Hmm.
So, so I could see like his dogmas in the book. Something that really connected with me is when Steve Jobs built the first Apple store, how he rented a warehouse in Cupertino and just built the Apple store in a warehouse, finished, and then started over because he
Hmm.
built it wrong, right? And that kind of that just a great learning about how to bring products to market and how to um, how to do things right, if you will. So that's a book that I highly recommend, that you
And this
might
is
not think of when you entrepreneurship book, right?
and this is the one with Walter Isaacson, right? Is that
That's correct. Yes.
okay? Sorry, my background just went away. Just give
I
me
mean,
one
there's
second.
another great book, autobiography. I read Shoe Dog by Mr.
Yeah,
Phil Knight, the founder of Nike.
yeah.
That one reads more like an autobiography, but there's also a component to it about just battles between, I mean, Shoe Dog is about how he argued with his co-packer, um, how he was battling for market share. So they read as autobiographies, but then when you actually read the book, there's good entrepreneurship lessons in them.
Yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs have recommended Shoe Dog for sure, but I'll check out the Steve Jobs one. An innovative product or idea in the current e-commerce, retail, or tech landscape that you feel excited about.
MealPro.
Okay. I should have said not your business. Um, a business or productivity tool or software that you would recommend or a productivity tip.
Personally, I always use freeware I'm
Okay.
very reluctant to buy licenses for software. So there's a lot of like Skype is a free tool that I use to talk to freelancers. Skype is going away, so I don't know what we're going to transition to.
Hmm.
But productivity tools, I mean, there's a bunch of project management tools that are paid, and there's some that are free. And I've learned there's not the difference between the free and the paid. There's really diminishing marginal returns, right? For every dollar that you spend on a paid software, there's really very very minimal, if any, gain for a free software. So I've learned to build the business around like freeware.
Hmm.
Um, and there's a lot of great free alternatives in software. Um, even like a text editor, I always recommend to be light
Hmm.
on those expenses.
Yeah. Yeah, they can add up, right? Like subscription, it's like you add a subscription and then you don't use it, but they keep on charging you. It's like a hidden expense becomes many
And
many
I've
times.
made that mistake. I've purchased very expensive software, like a 1 year license that costs an arm and a leg, and then you figure out, we're not using it as much as we thought we were going to use it. And that's what happens to me when every time I buy a software. It just seems like we didn't quite get the value
Hmm.
from it. With some rare exceptions, like we use a software for like nutrition facts. That's mission critical. But in terms of like productivity, I recommend just the Google Calendar could be great.
Yeah, for sure. Another startup or business in e-commerce, retail, or tech that you think is currently doing great things. Any other business that you like?
I mean, I think you touched on this earlier. There's a lot of disruptive technologies that are coming out, and I can't drill it down to just one particular one yet.
Hmm.
But I know there's great things coming, and so we'll have to see who emerges. So I think as a category, I would just say the robotics that you mentioned earlier. I'm sure there's great new technology that's coming out, and we have to let it play out, let it unravel.
Okay. A peer entrepreneur or business person whom you look up to or someone who inspires you.
Well, I'd say the Berkshire Hathaway folks. I like what they asked Warren Buffett at a Berkshire Hathaway meeting, and they asked him, if you had one entrepreneur from the past that you could sit down and have lunch with, who would it be?
Hmm.
And his answer was along the lines of, well, I've already met them because I've read all their books,
Hmm.
right? So it's as if I already knew them. And that's kind of how I feel about, the Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, because I've watched so many of their interviews. I've read Charlie Munger's books, The Psychology of Human Misjudgment.
Hmm.
Um, so it feels like, I mean, that's my North Star personally.
Hmm.
Those are the guys that I look up to.
The great thing about Charlie Munger was not only that he was a wise guy, but he was funny. So it was like a double punch.
That's right. And the book says it, the wit and wisdom of Charlie Munger, right? Charlie Munger's almanac
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
wit and the wisdom.
He was very interesting guy. Very interesting guy. Final question. Best business advice that you have ever received or you would give to other entrepreneurs?
I would just focus on just embracing the constraints. There's been so many times that I thought I needed money to build a business. I mean, oh, I don't have a kitchen. Renting a kitchen is expensive. I bought a kitchen. I bought the whole building now, right? A few years on. Um, but just having those constraints at the beginning really made me um, just made me focus. I would say that was a blessing in disguise. And there's always a silver lining to these constraints in hindsight. So that's just my 2 cents. Is just a silver lining that maybe you don't know you're going to have yet, but um, it's been so consistent for me.
No, I think it's very, very true. Constraints are they just I mean, if nothing, they allow you to think outside the box and think about different solutions that you would not think if you had a bunch of money and you would, you thought you knew the answer and you would just put the money, and many times that's not the answer. And I think that happens quite frequently in corporations where they just throw money at things. Um, well, Andy, thank you so much. Those were all the questions that I had. Thank you so much for sharing your story, how you grew, your philosophies, which was very interesting and different from, I would say, a lot of the entrepreneurs I've interviewed. So thank you so much again. If anybody wants to check out your products, what's the best way to do that?
That's mealpro.com.
Awesome. Well, Andy, thank you so much again, and I wish you all the very best.
Thank you. Great talking.